The SPC is making big updates to their day 1, 2, and 3 outlooks, giving them a refresh look and adding conditional intensity groups. This will become implemented around March 3rd of this year. And in this video, I'm going to give a detailed breakdown of what is coming up and what will be new. The SPC states that additional intensity information will be added to the SPC convective outlooks for day 1, 2, and 3 on March 3rd, starting with the 1630Z Day 1 convective outlook. The outlook categories will not change and should happen in a similar frequency to the past. Intensity will now be conditional, meaning if a tornado, wind gust, hail report occurs, how strong, intense, large do we expect it to be? And represented by 3 intensity levels with only 2 for hail on the individual hazard graphics, which are shown below the text there. The categorical outlook graphics will have a visual update, including the text moving labels from the image to a legend, but will otherwise represent the same impacts that we saw earlier with marginal, slight, enhanced, moderate, and high for each category as before, which you can also see below the text there. Here I've put the old and the new SPC Day 1 outlooks. These are specifically from March 15th of last year. Now I'm going to walk you through the main differences that I can immediately notice. The first thing I notice is the markings of the risks is not visible in the new one here. I think that really cleans it up. The next thing I want to point out is that the interior of the risks is much more darker. I think this really pops out, and I think it really makes the map much easier to read as well. And then finally, the last thing I notice is the legend in each one is much different. The one on the right, the newer one, is much more easier to read in my opinion. I think it looks a lot cleaner than the old one, and I think this is definitely an upgrade. And in general, I think everything is much more cleaner, much more easier to read, and I think that everything is a big upgrade to what we already had. Next, we are going to be changing to the brand new conditional intensity groups, or CIGs. The SPC states that the SPC will represent these intensity forecasts as conditional intensity groups, or CIG, or more simply just intensity levels. These are 3 intensity distributions. We have CIG1, CIG2, and 3. These will be utilized to communicate increasing intensity of significant severe hazards should severe hazards occur. These new conditional intensity groups will be visible on the SPC Severe Weather Outlook Day 1, 2, and 3 graphics and disseminated through the SPC Outlook PTS product, replacing the current operational sign label. Next, we are going to look at what the different intensity levels will look like. Level 1 will look like the normal hatching that we see now, with not really much different, it's just level 1. Level 2 will look like a full stripe going across, and then finally level 3 will be more of a crossing going both directions, full lines, and that will indicate our level 1, level 2, and level 3 CIGs. Next, the SPC states that these conditional intensity groups were derived using 20 years of SPC mesoanalysis data extracted from the time and location of observed tornadoes during that period. The target tornado distributions for tornado intensity can be seen in the chart below for each conditional intensity group, or CIG. Note that EF2 plus tornadoes increase from 7% of the sample when no area is drawn to 20% at CIG1, 30% at CIG2, and roughly 40% at CIG3. Similarly, EF3 plus tornadoes increase from roughly 1% with no areas to 6% at CIG1, 12% at CIG2, and 19% at CIG3. Now we're going to take a little bit of a look at the graph that is down here. We've got the tornado intensity distribution by conditional intensity group. First of all, we've got CIG less than 1. This will have a lot more EF0 tornadoes than any of the rest. A bit more EF1 tornadoes. EF2 you'll see rarely, EF3 to EF4 you'll pretty much never see when you have a CIG less than 1. For CIG1, you can see, as shown by this hatching here, that EF0 has declined, but EF1 is still rising a little bit. But you mainly see the bigger difference with the EF2 through 4 plus, all starting to rise a bit. EF2 has gone from 6 all the way up to 14%. You've got EF3 jumping from 1 to 5, and EF4 has made a bit of a jump from 0.1 up to a full 1%. Next up, CIG2, as shown by this hatching here, has the EF0 once again decreasing, but you also have EF1 decreasing this time. Here you've also got EF2, EF3, EF4 plus all rising up again. You've got EF2 going from 14 to 18%, EF3 making a jump from 5 to 9%, and EF4 making a good jump up 2% up to 3%. Finally, we've got CIG3, as seen by this hatching here. You've got EF0 and EF1 have both decreased again, and then you've got EF2, EF3, and EF4 plus have increased again, just like CIG2. You've got EF2 going from 18% up to 22%. You've got EF3 going from 9% up to 14%. And then finally, you've got EF4 making a good jump again from 3% to 5%. So as you go from CIG less than 1 up to CIG3, you're going to see a decrease in EF0 and EF1 tornadoes. And you are going to see a pretty good increase from EF2 and up tornadoes. We are now looking at, once again, the old versus new graphics. We are looking at the tornado probabilities now for the day 1. You can see we now have the intensity on our legend here instead of just that black significant box. You can also see our CIG1 also going all the way out into the 2% area, which is going to indicate that we can still see some strong tornadoes in that 2% area. They just won't be likely. There will be, it's basically saying if there's going to be any tornadoes, there's a good possibility that they will be a little strong. Then you've got the CIG level 2 here, including the parts of the 10, 15, and 30% areas. And this will really start to ramp things up here. This is when you really want to be looking out and being prepared for severe weather and tornadoes. And then finally, we've got CIG level 3 here. This is in the 30% region. And I remember live streaming this day, we actually had 2 tornado emergencies right where this CIG intensity 3 is. So this would be pretty much a spot on forecast for that area. And if you see this intensity 3 on a tornado graphic, you really have to be weather aware that coming day, because there's most likely going to be a very significant tornado outbreak with very strong tornadoes. Now we are looking at the old and the new wind probability maps. So really the main thing that I notice is that we've got only, in this example, we've only got an intensity 1 wind, which is really going to indicate that there's a really good chance that we have it with a 45%, but they just won't be super strong. So basically what it's saying is they won't be very strong, but there's a very good chance that you are going to see it. Another thing that I do really need to point out is that they are adding a 75% and a 90% win probabilities. So these are going to be rare, but if there's a, like for example, a 90%, you're basically going to see severe winds. And then really what's going to indicate how severe it is going to be these 3 intensities. So let's say you have a 90%, but it's only a level 1 CIG. You're going to see those severe winds, but they're most likely not going to be super strong, maybe 60, maybe 65 mile an hour winds. And then let's say, for example, we have 90%, CIG3. This is going to be for our very strong, very strong derechos that we have, that you are going to see, and it's going to be some upwards of 90 to 100 mile an hour winds. It's going to be very severe, and this is a kind of day you really have to be looking out for these winds. Finally, we are looking at our day one hail outlook example. So the main thing I want to point out is the probabilities will stay the same. This example, once again, only has a level 1, and really the main difference with hail that makes it different from the tornado and wind is that there will only be 2 intensity. There will not be 3. So there will only be 2 different levels. So that is really the main difference. There's not really much more to talk about this one. So that is pretty much all that will be for the hail. Next, we are going to be looking at the new probability to the category conversion tables. The SPC states that the probabilities and conditional intensity will be combined in the following way to create the SPC categorical outlook. These categorical outlook categories will not change and should happen in a similar frequency to the past. While additional intensity information has been added, the new probability to category conversion has been developed in a way to match historical SPC outlook creation practices. Looking at these category conversion tables, looking just at the tornado for now, we can see that for the less than CIG1, the maximum you can get up to is just an enhanced risk, which makes sense because you're most likely just going to see a lot of tornadoes, but they just won't be strong. Another thing I noticed that I want to point out is you can have a CIG2 2%, and that will indicate a slight risk. So this table can be very confusing, but it does make sense. Like for example, we've got CIG3, you cannot use it on 2% or 5%. And another thing is just a 30% CIG5, CIG3 or 2 can be a high risk, and you can only have the least you can have for CIG3 is an enhanced risk. You cannot get a slight or a marginal risk with CIG3. For the wind conversion table, we have a couple things to talk that I want to talk about. We've got for less than CIG1, this can only get up to an enhanced risk for 90%, which is basically you're going to get you're 100% almost 100% going to get severe winds, but it's just not going to be strong, so that's going to give you an enhanced risk. Another thing that popped out to me is you cannot get a CIG3 risk for 5, 15, or 30%. And something that was kind of surprising to me was you can only get high risks with CIG3, which goes for 45, 60, 75, and 90% risks. Next up here, we've got the hail conversion table. You can only get an enhanced risk just like the others with a CIG less than 1. But something that I did notice is that you cannot get any kind of a high risk up here for hail. There's no such thing as a high risk for hail anymore starting in March. So that will be quite interesting to see. But I think this table does make pretty good sense. I think all the tables so far have made pretty good sense. I think I agree with pretty much all of them and pretty much everything they say. So that's really all I've got to say for hail. But otherwise, we've got 45 and 60 can be moderate. I believe 60 used to be a high risk, so I think they've downgraded that to a moderate risk. Finally, we've got the day 3 outlook probabilities. I'm going to break this one down a little bit more as I do have the older one up here as well. For 5%, we've got marginal for significant 1, but you can get a slight with significant 2. It used to be, or it currently is, you can only get a marginal with this. So there is a possibility you can get a slight with that. For 15%, it would be a slight risk. Now, if you get to significant 2, you can have an enhanced risk with this. There is no significant severe, so we can cross this one off, same as this and this real quick. For 30%, it would be an enhanced, which we do see for significant or CIG 1 and 2, but for CIG less than 1, it would only be a slight risk. For 45% hail, it would also be an enhanced, but as you get to CIG 2, you can get to a moderate risk. So that is an update there. And finally, the brand new, I'm just now noticing, 60%, we can have enhanced for less than CIG 1, but a moderate risk for CIG 1 and CIG 2. Now wrapping things up here, I do want to say this will be our 50th video on this channel, including live streams, and I do believe we have crossed 3,000 channel views recently. I do want to say that we do live severe weather coverage on this channel as well for severe weather outbreaks and just severe weather coverage in general. And if you want to be notified for that, make sure you subscribe and turn on the notifications. And if you enjoyed this video, please give it a like. But that will be all, and I will see you in the next one.